Hey, hey. Okay, and then do I have to log in for the Clay Tantor?
You don't see the stream?
I see episode 4, Plato's Cave, alternate realities, and my volume is down.
Yeah, you're good.
And I see the word live.
You're good. You're good.
All right.
Yeah.
It's like the pre-run slate.
Remember when I first found out what those were for, I was amazed.
Welcome to the Richest Family, episode 4. Plato's Cave, alternative realities, and false narratives. In the allegory, The Cave, Plato describes a group of people who have lived chained to the wall of a cave, all of their lives facing a blank wall. The people watch shadows projected on the wall from objects passing in front of a fire and give names to these shadows. The shadows are the prisoner's reality, but are not accurate representations of the real world. These shadows represent the fragment of reality that we can normally perceive through our senses, while the objects under the sun represent the true forms of objects that we can only perceive through reason. History is rebound with examples of our cultures attempting to alter the consensus reality through technology. How will AI alter how we see reality? How has our society created reality as a project through history? We've got Greg Coles here. We've got myself, Clay Tantor. We have Magnetic Stripper. Lifelong friends talking about weird stuff. We had a little hiatus. I was on a trip back to good old Tennessee. But we're back and we're ready to talk about some cool, weird stuff. Jim, you usually do a pretty good disclaimer on what we're here to do and why. Would you mind giving a little disclaimer?
Everything is false, which means everything will be permitted.
Everything not specifically forbidden is now mandatory.
It's now mandatory. This is just our special way of saying that we know that this is treading into the realms of complete and total conjecture and or falsehoods, and take no responsibility for any of our actions as we did in our teenage years. No, we know we're treading in the strange, unexplored territories of the psyche, and this should be taken, especially by younger people watching this podcast, with a grain of salt.
So we don't get into rigorous proofs of our conjectures. We don't try to back up things that we say with documented historical records. We're just enjoying each other's company and kind of getting into our beliefs and our thoughts. Would that be fair?
Deep fake.
Well,
Yeah,
often that is the thrill of the chase, is debunking your own proof.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
That's how you keep it real.
Awesome.
Have you ever taken a philosophy class?
Right.
Exactly.
Well, the theme somewhat represents how philosophy uncovers truth. So let's start with you, Jim. You've one of the themes in this that's been kind of interesting that you've kind of brought up is this idea of like how we're kind of entering as a society into a fragmented consensus reality. I think that's kind of your thesis. Care to kind of talk about that a little bit in your perspective?
Okay, well, I'm going to break it down a little bit further than that even, and say the big issue that we have is we used to think that there was this objective reality that we could pin down and say, this is truth. And then over time, we came to realize that there's a lot of wiggle room as to what is real. And truth is this kind of strange, non-sensical object. And what we are attempting to do is give our perceptions of that. And what happens is a lot of people are seeing the same thing from a lot of different angles and creating a lot of different models. And some examples of this are, when during the Middle Ages, the world was flat because we knew the world was flat. That was reality. When somebody discovers something about the physical nature of the universe, quantum mechanics, string theory, all these things, they affect our perception. We suddenly start seeing attributes of things, even if they're not real. Spontaneous genesis.
It emerges. It's like an emergent reality.
In the Middle Ages, we saw frogs jumping out of wads of leaves and streams because that's how frogs were born. Not coming from tadpoles and eggs. We just saw them jump out of some leaves and we're like, oh, a bunch of leaves get wrapped up together and a frog is created, right?
The spontaneous generation.
Spontaneous generation. So one of the big problems is we get to a point.
I personally see it more like emergent reality. It's not spontaneous. It comes from the entire society having a whole bunch of vectors at once, and it's a consensus thing. It's not spontaneous one individual.
I'm getting to that, Clay.
Yeah, sure. I'm
getting to that.
Yeah.
So what happens is, especially, this is what happens when you have the physical sciences emerge, right? People start saying, look, this is the way the universe works, and we can create this Cartesian model of the way reality is structured and the way things are. And so what happens is that science and other disciplines create a structure so that people can have this kind of foothold in order to say, this is our consensus reality. And then they add things to it like their religious beliefs and their different
so that's a skeleton that they then hang these other things off of, is kind of...
Well, this becomes fossilized, right? This is kind of what's happened in a lot of countries around the world. I'm not going to say just the Americas, right? what happens is we have this really rigid, fossilized version. It's kind of like saying there's the history of America and the story of America. The story of America is a tale that we tell children in elementary school.
Right. And that's where the culture war is kind of upset right now, is because that story is changing to be more historical and less of a story.
But the myth is what people have lived with for time infinitum. The concept of like an objective history is kind of new.
That's right. That's right.
The winner writes history, kind of.
Yeah.
Or even just the fact that, like there is like this nuts and bolts thing, like it happened on Tuesday and it was raining, as opposed to like a fanciful story where we all look cool and had a party at the end. Like like a lot of the
that's the story I want to write for myself with AI. For Instagram.
The story of the Crusader Knights. They lost most of the battles with Saladin, yet these stories, have like Roland trumpeting triumphantly as they ran quickly to avoid being killed. But his last trumpet blast was so heroic. Okay, you're running away. You're running away.
So
Jim,
basically, what we've ended up with. Let's take a use case, and I'm going to color code it so that all the names are hidden, and that is, we have a red reality and a blue reality, for example, and we have people who sample from both of them that live in a purple reality, where they're kind of cherry picking between the two.
Gender bias or information bias.
Yes, and what's interesting is the media, once they figured out, localized media, once they figured out what the percentages look like, actually work to create a resonance around whatever leaning they think that the populace has.
And whatever will draw more people into that whirlpool of belief, right? That's the media, because the more gets pulled into the whirlpool, the more money they're going to make, and etc.
Well, people just will not put up with something that doesn't fit their world model, right? And so instead of trying to advance themselves and look at this blob that is the truth, that is in the center of all, existence, they're like, hey, I want to think about this and I want somebody to tell me I'm right. Well, the side effect of that is that it creates a schism in when you used to have a more unified reality model or consensus reality, because that's all consensus reality is. It's a bunch of people agreeing on what reality is. Right.
Well, also that's what a science is. You've got enough people having a peer review to agree on what is true and what is not.
Science is wrong.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Don't look up.
As soon as you say the moon is a holographic projection, the firmament is correct because a document written 3,000 years ago says so, right? You end up with a major issue, and that's why you see these kind of chimeric reality models, like QAnon, for example, is a chimeric model. And at one point, Clay and I were even discussing whether part of that reality model is actually a feedback loop in machine.
Being generated. That's a great segue, because what I want you to talk a little bit about now, Jim, is saying that we've got this red reality and blue reality, and people now, there's a feedback loop where like our society will actually feed back into that belief system. How does AI, generative AI, like what happens in that model with generative AI in your mind? How does it affect that?
So let's look at something that everybody has seen. And by everybody, I mean everybody who has had to endure other countries creating propaganda to influence elections, for example. So one thing that we have seen is specifically charged political memes that include religious imagery, that include fake.
Are you talking about like the Pope puffy jacket kind of stuff?
Pope puffy jacket would be an example. I'm talking like
Psychological hits.
Vladimir Putin as a medieval knight with carrying a sword. Various images that are religious. So that stuff was being created by Russian, troll mills, right?
Hey, psychology professors who work for the KGB, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these are as smart and as forceful as you're going to find in the world, right?
Well, a lot of people lost their jobs with AI because now you can just type in a prompt and get out a piece of propaganda to cut and paste into your mimetic structure, which is what this stuff really is. When you say a meme, you were talking about a fragment of a mimetic structure.
Well, like 2 examples come to mind. One was that whole thing about Biden being like a child molester. There was like a whole campaign about him like hugging some kid. They're like, dude, he's a compassionate human being. You never find Trump hugging anybody that he's not paying to hug. Oh, geez, I lost my thought. But it's.
But I mean, it's the same thing, Greg. On the other side of the tracks, to be fair here.
Yes.
There is definitely propaganda coming from the left.
Emotional bias.
That creates emotional bias. And if you wanted to look at it and say, what is the most important thing? Like if we took a use case, like a country, like let's just say a country called Red, White, and Blue. This country is attempting to do what's best for it. It wants to do what's best for it, but it is constrained by multiple factions that want to basically override the other faction and believe that they can create a narrative in order to do that, right? So this is where AI becomes dangerous because you can create the fakes to create the bias.
And a lot of this is really coming back to this earlier issue of the sort of schism between oration and the written word. Like the written word has this dispassionate, cupboard of facts that does nothing to engage the particular audience or the feeling of the time or the emotional intensity of the speaker, which now to us you're like, oh man, that's just some bullshit that's making things inaccurate. But in these early cultures where everybody knew everybody, the ability to capture people's emotion was almost as important as the actual information being given.
Hey, Greg.
And that's what I'm seeing on news now.
Greg,
yes.
That's the magic of it.
Hang on to that thought for 1 second.
Sure.
Jim, you created I'm showing up on the screen kind of one of these Putin images. It's Putin as a monk, a Buddhist monk. You generated some images of alternate realities using what technology was that you were using?
It's stable diffusion. It's like the lowest common denominator for the every man's AI image generation.
Sure, that's primarily what I use also.
Yeah. So let's talk about this first image for a second.
Sure.
So what do you think I was asking the prompt when I created this?
This is the brutalist architecture one we're talking about?
Yeah, but what do you think the prompt was that I was asking the AI to generate a reference to? Just
sci-fi architecture.
Okay, so the prompt was something along the lines of, please generate a photographic image, not super photographic, but kind of representational, of a futuristic dystopian world destroyed by AI.
Okay, then that's the explosions on the street.
This is after the AI has already taken over.
Yes.
Right.
And so what I'm going to say is AI, the way that it put this together, it really knows what. Can you put up one of the ones that looks more like a utopia, Clay?
Well, also,
I don't have access to some of these.
It's creating an image that's.
Can you tell me which number?
Oh,
like that.
Boo.
Do you see that one?
Yeah, it should have included. Okay, so that's another dystopian world destroyed by AI.
I'm gonna go to 6, like that.
Yeah. Oh.
Like,
yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So this is an example of what AI thinks that, or what it's been trained to understand as a perfect utopia created by AI.
The Burj Khalifa?
Exactly. But if you look at it, there's this ongoing theme that there's a small amount of nature preserved inside of the technology.
Well, there's only green space in some of the squares.
There's only green space, and that the humans are almost always housed in highly vertical structures.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what AI thinks.
Let's see.
Oh boy!
I can't get to any of them. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I was asking earlier if they all were unlocked, but apparently they're all locked. So okay.
Well, then here we go with like the expectation of AI overrule versus what the reality would be more like, oh, my phone's getting an error message. Oh, I have to subscribe to this now. As opposed to like explosions and people with guns. Like, you guys watch Mr. Robot?
Totally.
I didn't watch the final season, but I thought the build-up was amazing. I really thought it was a great concept and brought a lot of great concepts to light.
Yeah, I mean, there was some really good stuff in there for sure. So, Jim, what made you drive to this alternate reality?
Okay, so one thing that I would like to talk about super quick. I feel like one of the things that might be going on, and this is my crackpot thing. One of the things that might be going on with consciousness is that if the universe has to represent infinite possibilities, then that means that everything has to be represented that's possible inside of that system, right?
Mm-hmm. Like on a quantum level, that's the way, quantum multiverse is.
Just on a semantic level, even, like the meaning of the universe is that it represents every possible thing, that it's kind of a, bubbling, frothing...
it's the parenthesis that everything is within.
Right, and so I feel like between dreams, which I really see a similarity in the way that, a lot of AI-generated images have this kind of almost burned film, brainy, and then they're sublimated into imagery. I feel like if you really pay attention to your dreams, you'll see that occur in your actual dreams, right?
Right, where there's only the significant things are in focus and everything else is less so.
Well, think about the lettering that you see in dreams.
Yes,
like
I love that.
I love it. In AI-generated images, like the residue.
Like
looks
that.
exactly the same.
It should come up on the screen here in a second. So yeah, in this image, you've got this kind of text, and I could try to figure out what it says. It says maybe caveat. I mean, it's hard to tell, but it's more like a cryptic breakdown. You can see the letter font, but you don't know what it's saying per se.
It kind of reminds me of the production design of Raised by Wolves. Did you guys see that series? Yeah. I really thought that was one of the most impressive sci-fi stories that have come out in the last few years, just the concept of like the atheists versus like these strict deists, and like there was the deists who had the technological advances that it somehow like came from their scripture, was really kind of a unique concept that, like, while very much relating to our present concept, was really kind of taking it from left field,
Talking about two different reality models, like the reality model of the way that family units were structured, and the way that their search for truth is structured. They have almost like the crusader types. But yeah, exactly. So that's a perfect example of how worldview and consensus reality molds societies and the structures of those societies.
Well, like you have like deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. Like one, like you're like starting with a concept, and then you're looking at the world and saying, okay, well, this fits the concept, and thus my concept is real. Versus like, oh, what are observing nature? These are the facts. Put them together, draw a conclusion from these facts. That we generally understand as science, but that was not really the way things were done through most of history.
Greg,
like so God is good, milk is good, so therefore God made milk.
Greg, that's a good segue to your riff, which is you've been kind of talking about how people are, convinced to disbelieve their own senses through history. Like, the reality that they see in front of their eyes. It's like gaslighting, whether it's color or perspective of the world or balance in the world, what the true balance is. Like when you bring up this Raised by Wolves things, what's the the balance of good and evil, that both sides of there think they're doing good and the other's evil. How in history has like those consensus realities kind of, what's your thoughts about some of that?
Well, that coming from that schism that I was talking about with both the Viking culture and the Greek culture, although I'm sure it happened everywhere around the world, is just that like going from information being the force of the person telling it versus having like these objective realities that will have like a greater weight than a single person talking, be like, oh, well, this is the voice of all our ancestors speaking. So it has a greater weight than just, oh, it's my opinion, which is dependent on like, how hungry is my audience? How tired is my audience? How scared is my audience? And that's something that we're really sort of getting to now with the advent of live media, like people listening to someone talking news as opposed to just reading what happens. And I really feel like that, I'll say the word, Fox News, that is their strength. They're like Disney used to like preserve a sense of wonder. Fox is reserving a sense of outrage. Mm-hmm. And like the issues change, but the emotional response is staying the same.
Mm-hmm. So can you give some interesting examples from history as well that kind of like talk to this idea?
Well, all religions, well, maybe there might be a few that aren't, depend on these like group activities, singing, dancing, and then achieving some mental state that is different than the people outside the group. Because the religious group is all about exclusivity and inclusivity. We are the chosen one. The people who are not in this group, even though they're the same religion but just belong to the cousin's cult, they're outsiders. They have no idea what they're talking about. Exactly. Yeah, this is Santo Daime Church. This is modern church, loosely based on Christianity, but they're taking ayahuasca and dancing for hours. I've been to a couple of these ceremonies. And you wear these all white clothes. Everyone dresses the same. The dances are super simple. You're basically just it's like a samba, like a very slow samba where everyone is moving in a rhythmical manner and singing these very simple rhythmical songs. And the idea is you're losing yourself. You're losing yourself to this sort of nimbus in your head. And like now I could say like, oh, okay, well, this is me taking this drug, But to someone without a foundation of analyzing reality, they'd be like, oh, we're all this thing that is greater than my own personal experience. And I think I have a couple other examples of in the GIFs of people like doing group dancing and group movements to achieve this sort of like hive mind experience.
So you've got like the moshing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
People basically creating flocking behaviors.
Yes.
There
we go.
Right.
We on the left hate those on the right until we get to the other side. Then we change our our sides.
Right. Right. Exactly. Any other, like in here, you've got crowd surfing, right? Remember, we've all been to a punk show where there was crowd surfing, right?
Where's up? We're down. I'm just going, man. Where's for squares?
Where's for squares? That's right. Did you create some alternate realities you want to share with?
No, I was mainly playing with ChatGPT, so I mainly pumped a text up there.
Okay,
so I've got a couple alternate reality. Yeah, I posted a couple pictures, but they were I didn't really like the ones I was generating. They were just weak looking. I didn't want to waste the time. But I found here we go. Synchronized dancing and a couple other things about the Greeks and the Vikings. Yeah, I love that one with the headbanging competition. Yeah, and the gorilla doing the Sufi dance.
Yeah. Oh yeah, in the pool. Right.
She's a maniac dancer.
Okay, that's great. But then, did you Viking culture?
Yeah, let's see. I've got.
Did you write an alternate reality?
I put him in the. Let's see. History of Destructive. Yeah, there's the first one.
Okay, let me read it.
Yeah.
The history of destructive the word among advocates of oration can be traced back to ancient times, with examples found in various cultures throughout history, including Vikings and Greeks. In Viking culture, oration was highly valued, and the art of storytelling was passed down from generation to generation through the spoken word. The Vikings believed that writing down stories and myths would diminish their power and rob them of their ability to inspire and entertain their listeners. As a result, they had a strong distrust of the written word, and only a small number of runic inscriptions have been found from the Viking Age. Is that an alternate reality?
That's the way it is. That is that's the.
Is that the history, or is that generated by ChatGPT?
This is ChatGPT, but it's not diverging from reality.
Okay. You're not asking for an alternate reality.
No. This is accurate up till now. Yeah.
And did you have any alternate realities?
It's getting there. This is just building the foundation of these advanced things.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got like 2 or 3
awesome.
text blocks there. I got one on the Diamond Church and something else.
Well,
I've got 3 text blocks.
I would like to talk about something that's kind of on my mind around all of this, and kind of how I'm feeling about some of like AI. And one thing that I've kind of noticed is, like, since pretty much right around the year 2000, there's been a tendency in our society to remix. And you guys know this about me. I went to architecture school in the 80s, specifically to do design around architecture in the virtual environment, and a movement of architecture that was very prevalent when I was and very kind of up and coming when I was in architecture school was this transition away from modernism to postmodernism. And the thesis of postmodernism was around here. I'll just kind of go to the wiki article on postmodernism. Let's go here. Late 20th century style and concept in the arts, architecture, and criticism that represents a departure from modernism, that's key, and has in its heart a general distrust of grand theories and ideologies, as well as a problematic relationship with any notion of art. And so it's kind of a rejection of the idealism of modernism in modern art, and there's very much a kind of leaning towards folk and even nostalgia. So you'd see architects going back to themes of Greek ionics and mashing it up in very kind of angular ways. Like, what if Greek architecture met a Vegas girl, a Vargas girl, right? These kind of that was common in the 80s. These kind of bold colors and lines and stuff. And Peter Eisenman, who was one of the key architects of postmodernism, I'll look him up real quick, see if we can get a picture. Yep, there he is. There's the dude. Here, let me show a picture. So he had a son who was a DJ, and he was heavily influenced by remix culture. And you see this as developed in things like Girl Talk, and where Girl Talk is almost like it's a band that's completely all remix based on disco, like You Love Disco. So before I kind of go into my thesis, I just want to hear from Jim a little bit on his opinion on Girl Talk and that kind of. Jim, what do you?
Yeah, so Girl Talk, in my opinion, is kind of the last death throes of postmodernism. I feel like that was coming out of what they called booty culture. If you know anything about that, booty mix culture. So at the end of Electroflash, which was a slightly postmodernist but also slightly modernist movement, where they were attempting to create a new type of electro that was heavily influenced by underground European culture and New York, like no wave. Basically, you end up in this situation where you have a facade, because this is the thing that's the most important thing about discussing postmodernism, is to understand that 90% of what goes on in postmodernism is on the surface, right? And it is like putting a strip mall is a perfect example of postmodernism. You put a facade on what is essentially a box store, right? And so if you want to really get to the crux of what's going on, I suggest in postmodernism looking at the reality models and structures that are coming out of radical literature, such as Michael Moorcock's Elric of Melniboné, Kathy Acker, right? And so Kathy Acker's session,
those were pretty prevalent at that time. Those are all 1990.
Yeah, they're postmodern literature,
92,
and so
93.
Even before that, basically Michael Moorcock stuff goes back.
Way earlier than that. That's in the
but it's
late
still
70s.
postmodern.
60s or 70s.
Yeah, and so what they do is they have a facade, like in Elric, facade of a fantasy character who is, somewhere in between a hero and an anti-hero, or a villain even, and a world that is like a fantasy world, but then the concepts underneath it. So this is the thing that I always found interesting about postmodernism, is that the thing that's being glued on top of and kit bashed on top of is actually modernism, right? So you could say the Millennium Falcon, the surface of it's all hacked together bits of models of tanks and ships, So it is like a postmodern surface, right? Just like Elric here is from Clark Ashton Smith and H.P. Lovecraft and Lord Dunsany, right? But the underpinnings are about a man emerging as a modern man. That's the entire, and a modern, him bringing about the modern world, right?
Because he differed from a lot of sword and sorcery characters in that it was his understanding rather than through some innate genetics that gave him the edge, like comparing him to like Conan or something.
Yeah, well, he's fighting against the world. His main nemesis is the world and the gods in order to build a new reality whereby reason can function.
Okay, I want you to hang on, guys.
He wants to destroy the not just the patriarchy. He wants to destroy the entire thing to remake the world.
Okay,
right?
So that's a trope that's pretty interesting. There's a lot of that, like in the Avengers, Eternals, or whatever. Not the Avengers, and Decide Eternals, but. Hang on a second, because what I'm getting at is that, like, No Wave was completely against postmodernism. It went, like, back to modernism, right?
It is modernism. That's kind of before. No Wave is slightly before what I would call textbook postmodernism. And it was ultra-modern, just like industrial music. An attempt to create music like nothing you
has ever existed.
Before.
Okay, so hang on, because I want to make this point. I feel our society, and this is going to be accelerated by AI, is stuck in a regurgitative nostalgia loop that doesn't allow for it to truly, authentically create at this point in our juncture. And you see this in, like, when you go to this Balenciaga and this, like, Pope. I mean, I hope you guys have seen this before. This is the... Can
I just break in a second and comment on what you're bringing up? That I think the urge towards romanticized nostalgia is more than just a current trend. I think it is a deep psychological need for human beings that is really a pattern that has emerged through history. You know, like trying to refine Jerusalem, thinking that there is some core that needs to go back to. And Joe Franklin really brought it out. That was rehashing the previous thing.
No. I gotta shut you down. Here's the only
reason. Sure.
Because, like, this is about, like, how we're leaning towards using AI today. This is what I'm talking about, right? So let me show you something real quick. I'm gonna share my. You'll see it on the.
Yes, yeah. No, I see both.
Of Gucci, Harry.
Yeah, Harry Powder by Balenciaga.
But it's not just that. It's versus Street Fighter by Gucci. So now, 4 different streams have emerged. All of them are completely nostalgic.
Tread lightly.
Yes.
This is no ordinary muggle.
And
this is Ryu from Streets.
And people are obsessed with this shit.
Yeah, I can't get enough of it.
You're not alone.
A proper Balenciaga teacher.
Right?
One who's
That's
real
wonderful.
experience
It's wonderful.
defending
People
themselves
love this shit. They're obsessed with it. And they can't get enough. And I'm wondering whether for the next 100 years, this is all we're going to be doing.
Well, but the weird thing is you really see, there's people like us who jump up and down at new stuff. But 90% of the population just has this wall of xenophobia, and there are certainly great chunks of the media that are willing to just cater to that. They can make a lifetime of content just fucking whatever the new thing is.
So let's talk about that for 1 second, because an example that I love to bring up to play is Ralph Bakshi, when he was making his animated films, got these hotshot concept artists who were just breaking through, and one of them was a gentleman named Thomas Kincaid. So Thomas Kincaid, who became the darling of the right, basically painted what Ralph Bakshi referred to as fake nostalgia. As in, this isn't even nostalgia based on reality. What it's based on is a simulacrum. So what Thomas Kincaid was effectively painting were essentially Hummel figurines, and then putting little delightful lights in the window that created this warmth. Like, oh, I'm in the snow, but I'm looking into this window and seeing. And so basically, nostalgia in this regard is an attempt to reject the motion, the forward motion of time, right? And so, let me give you an example. My simulacrum. Major Matt Mason, The Man in Space, right? So this was a projection identity for children during the space age. This came out in, I believe, between 66 and 69.
I had the Moonwalker with the little rotating suction cup wheels.
Absolutely. Okay. So basically what's being said is that there are people in toy culture, for example, that are obsessed with this kind of nostalgia, but sometimes that nostalgia is actually because they believe that there was a wrong turn in the path of events.
Look at this
For
Thomas
example,
Kincaid I have up. It's got Disneyland.
That is a complete universe.
Yeah.
That is a universe.
Yeah.
But these worldviews have their history as well. I mean, Meissen, ceramics, so much of like early Fleischer Brothers, is using that same sort of Meissen visual.
Well, you have
style.
Lou Byworks also, who's the actual creator of Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
You guys gotta let me show my alternate reality.
Yeah.
Okay, so I took all of the characters from Blade Runner and mixed them with brutalist architecture.
Nice.
There she is. That's Chris, if you can't tell. So the way I did the prompts is I started with ChatGPT and I said, okay, what do you know about brutalist architecture? And it got into the themes. So you basically create a training within the training. Like when you get into a conversation with ChatGPT,
that's the best way.
You get it into a groove, right? You get it rolling. And so then I said, okay, let's think of brutalism as a type of fashion, and let's call it Brutalia. So I gave it a fake Italian name.
Nice.
What do you think? Roleplay as a 20-year Italian fashion designer. What do you think a Brutalia fashion would look like? And it got into this very simple cottons, zippers, utilitarian pockets, and all this stuff. And then I said, oh, do you know anything about Blade Runner? And it was like, yeah, I know all about Blade Runner. And then I said, well, tell me what the characters are and what their attributes are. And then for every single character, I asked it to behave like a 20-year fashion designer with a runway show for Brutalia, and this is what I got. And so completely, this is completely nostalgia. It's a nostalgia based on two elements of my personal nostalgia, which is, brutalist modernist architecture. So I've postmodernized brutalism in this, right? This is Ray Beatty. Is that how you say his name, Jim?
Beatty.
Yeah.
Beatty.
Yeah.
Both.
There he is. And you can tell he's got cotton instead of like that plasticky fake leather stuff. Very handsome jawline. here he is, and in this one I made sure there was the dove from, in the final scenes where he gives the monologue about tears in the rain. Yeah. Right. Very, very handsome, rugged look there, but wet hair, right? Make sure the hair is wet.
There's...
This is Tyrell.
Okay, I'm sorry, keep going.
This is Tyrell. So, you can imagine Tyrell telling Ray, your fire burned bright. You can see it in his eyes, right?
I really liked in the Denis Villeneuve remake, the main villain in that, who has the little drones as his eyes.
Right. Yeah. So, thanks for letting me go there with you guys. Okay. Final
I wouldn't
thoughts.
mind maybe reading one of my GPT.
Which one?
Let me see. I have two that sort of are related. Let me see. Synchronized dancing. Yeah, let me read I have two. Are they the same? Oh, let's see. It's scroll. I have one that's just on the Diamate Church, and then one that's sort of a broader thing of synchronized dancing.
Well, I see one that's talking about synchronized dance playing an important role in the Santo Daime Church.
Yes. Okay. Let me. I think. Let me go back into the other one where I put all my stuff. Yeah. British scholar. Okay. Let me see. Socrates. Oh man, I'm not seeing the ones that I put up.
Well, why don't I just read one, since you can't find
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah. Synchronized dance plays an important role in the Santo Daime Church, which is a syncretic religion organized in Brazil in the early 20th century. Santo Daime combines elements of indigenous shamanism, African religions, Catholicism, and spiritualism. And its rituals often involve the consumption of hallucinogenic beverage called ayahuasca. During Santo Daime rituals, members of the church often engage in synchronized dancing, which is known as dancing the Janeiro. The Janeiro is a collection of hymns that are sung during Santo Daime ceremonies, and the dancing is a way of physically expressing the spiritual energy that is believed to be present during the ritual. How's that, Greg?
Yeah, that's great. Here, I'll read the rest. The dance movements are often simple and repetitive, and they are intended to help participants enter a trance-like state where they can contact with the divine. The dancing is typically accompanied by singing, clapping, and the playing of musical instruments. So, there's no observers. Everyone's doing it. Synchronized dancing is seen as a way of promoting unity and community within the Santo Daime Church. As all members are encouraged to participate in the dance and move together in harmony, it is also seen as a way of connecting world and the spirits that are believed to inhabit it. Overall, synchronized dance is an integral part of the Santo Daime rituals and is seen as a powerful way of accessing the spiritual realm and connecting with the divine. So having been to some of these rituals, the ayahuasca is like taking DMT that instead of lasting for 90 seconds, lasts for hours. So, that one picture we had of, all the people dancing together at sort of a long exposure, that's what you're seeing. I mean, the people you're with just seem like this moving tidal wave, So, now that's the objective experience of the Daime ritual. But what I was seeing was some people who are extremely psychologically vulnerable being absorbed by the Daime Church. And that, in my opinion, was sort of the dark side of it.
Okay. Awesome.
But I don't know, what do you guys thoughts?
Jim, we're starting to roll to the end of the cast. Jim, what if you had some final thoughts about this subject, kind of where would you go with it?
The subject of group experience in the ecstatic states.
Yes.
I mean, that is kind of a core phenomena where, so I was doing a job, and the job was to create a stadium experience. And the big question that everyone had is, why are we creating stadium experiences in the early part of the 21st century? And what it came down to was the very thing that you were talking about, is that human beings gravitate towards communal experiences. And generally, these are not these are not natural experiences. They are artificially structured experiences that house some of these things, like nostalgia, the language of our ancestors, the enshrinement of the past, the proscribed and prescribed notions of divinity, right? And so we end up with, in fact, something that is very similar to our original discussion about consensus reality. Like, this is a reality that is constructed for consensus of this group. And I have no idea about what the truth of any of that is. And on one side, I want to be a complete skeptic. On the other side, I've had experiences where people have said the bass in this song is amazingly intricate and deep, and you just won't believe it. And then I hear the song and I'm like, I don't understand what they're talking about. So I'm in a club that has a system that's capable of reproducing all the bass frequencies, and then when I heard it in there, I was like, this is like a completely different thing than what I heard, because you have to have specific mechanisms to allow you to experience the material, right? And so I have always had an open mind when it comes to even the craziest of religions, because who knows what mechanisms exist underneath the surface to allow people to have experiences, ecstatic or, intellectual or whatever it might be. And that's, in a nutshell,
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think we've covered quite a bunch of really good stuff. Some of the themes that I hear in what we talked about are how consensus realities are manipulated by our culture, by interests, how they've done that, how that's happened throughout history, how we manipulate ourselves by our own wishes of the way we wish reality to be versus the way it really is.
Well, I'm seeing now.
One second.
Oh, sorry. Let me finish
the
point.
How science has attempted to break through those kinds of barriers. We didn't talk about it much, but it came up a couple of times. And then how we create consensus realities through ritual and dance and altering our perceptions with things like mind-altering substances. So I want to wrap this up. If there's some burning desires, then feel free, but we shouldn't go down too many deep lines because we got to close this up.
I just want to close it up and just say that we kind of live in a time of sort of like an increased amount of novelty. And I'm saying it's natural for a brain to create ideological filters to create a feeling of understanding, even amidst a torrent of things that one can understand. It's more information than you can chew. So you have to create this flavor of digestion, even though it is not necessarily accurate. So I don't know if that's clear, but that's how I get
that's like the Robert Anton Wilson theories on novelty, and the way that if something truly new happens, that the impacts on reality are huge, because we're so drilled into a kind of mechanistic routine right?
Right.
So we should get into that in one of our future conversations
the
about novelty.
Yeah, and the continuing trend of xenophobia as like a reaction to anything new, right? Like, how long can that sustain itself?
Neophobia.
Yes, sustaining a sense of outrage.
Yeah, we can talk about that also. Neophilia versus neophobia.
Yep.
Well, great. What an awesome way to end this. And I want to remind both of you how much I love you and appreciate the
Big hugs, brother.
Yeah, so much
I love
gratitude
you so much,
for
man.
being able to have these kind of conversations is definitely a privilege, and I'm privileged to have both of you in my life. Both of you have been incredible influences to me and an inspiration. So let's keep doing this, and let's get some more weird shit. How's that sound?
Absolutely.
Okay. Love you guys.
All right,
Love
guys.
you too.
Take care.
Bye.
Rock on.